This is Daz Davis, and you're listening to the Rebel Base Card Podcast. Great pull, kid.
If they don't go for this, we're gonna have to get out of here pretty quick, Chewie.
Everything's gonna be all right, kid.
You found the Rebel Base Card Podcast.
She may not look like much, but she's got it where it counts, kid.
I'm your host, Greg McLaughlin.
Have I made a few bad decisions? Sure.
We talk about cards, collecting Star Wars, and to people in the Star Wars community.
Don't worry, we're gonna meet up with some friends of mine.
Look for special episodes called The Breakfast Pack, talking about your favorite Star Wars shows.
We will never have a better chance than this.
All right, let's get started.
Well, perhaps it is time to begin again.
Welcome back, or if this is your first episode, welcome aboard. My name is Greg McLaughlin, and this is the Rebel Base Card Podcast. And this is a special episode released in part to help celebrate Star Wars Podcast Day 5, which is on Friday, February 7th, which is when this and a bunch of other podcasts will be released. This is going to highlight the anniversary, and I think this year is the 25th anniversary of Jedi Talk, and this is the first Star Wars-related podcast / netcast that premiered on February 7th, 1999. I know that in the past we've had over 100 fellow Star Wars podcasts who will be really filling your podcast queues, and it might take you some time. But when you get down to this one, we're just going to say welcome. This is a fun one. I think this is the third time that the Rebel Base Card Podcast has supported Star Wars Podcast Day, and this will be the second one for one of my, actually two of my guests. So just to kind of bring some flavor to the podcast, I welcomed back one, Mr. Daz Davies, the one person that when I look at my analytics, my Welsh listener. Daz, you have improved your background. I like the lighting, and the shelf keeps growing. How you doing, Daz?
Hey, Greg. Hello to everybody back home. Happy Star Wars Podcast Day. Yes, my background is ever increasing with various Star Wars items. I've come a long way since last year when I was. It was my first pod, the Star Wars Podcast Day last year, and I can remember being on trembling with fear, but then there was nothing to worry about. You held my hand through it all, and we had a good time. So I'm looking forward to today as well.
Just quickly, what do we have going on? We have a First Order Stormtrooper helmet. And then we have, what else we have back there?
Up top, we've got a Vader helmet. We've got the Luke helmet up there with his dad. We've got First Order Trooper, Poe Dameron. We've got the Mando. Well, we've got a series of Mandos. Probably Bo-Katan, my favorite, maybe. And then right at the bottom, we've got the old classic Stormtrooper helmet as well. So this is it. There's no more. I swear.
I was really hoping you're going to say this is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then it's like, what's Daz going to bring to dinner? But no, that's fine. You can call him by whatever you want. We'll just call him between us. We know this. This is like Monday, Tuesday. This is one for every day of the week. But Daz is not the only one joining us on this program for Star Wars Podcast Day. We have, welcome back, Frank Mulder, a.k.a. Mr. Daft Prawn, of course, another of the Card Squadron here with us. And in view, the whole time I'm going to be distracted because you have the ghost in the background.
I do. It's kind of unmissable, that one. I'd like to join Daz in saying happy Star Wars Podcast Day to everybody. Thanks for inviting me along. I was not expecting that when I was sending out my Star Wars Card Trader trades first thing this morning. So it's a real treat to be on with Daz and yourself, Greg. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, always be careful of when you reach out because, he's not working. Anyway, so it's... Which is funny because we, my buddy Paul and I had breakfast this morning, and it was one of those where we were done, but we were waiting for that 9 a.m. gilded drop. And it's sort of like, all right. And then all of a sudden you have to get in and take care of your business before the rest of the Saturday begins because especially if you're doing the gilded and Star Wars Card Trader, we'll get to it in a little bit. The good packs, they run out pretty fast. So if you're going to try to make a run for the gilded, you better get on it quick on those LE packs at any rate. All right. Podcast Day is fun because as a podcast listener first, podcaster second, always I like spotlighting fellow podcasters, and it was kind of nice because during Skeleton Crew, we kind of rotated in some guests. and it's nice because you can kind of, highlight other folks. But just to kind of get things started, because of where this kind of fits in, we'll get to a list. Some things we kind of want to talk about today. Some of our podcast list favorites. We have a lot, actually. I was thinking we've got to have some Hasbro Ghost follow up. I think we'll be talking about Skeleton Crew. Of course, no talk at this point of the year is going to be complete without a little bit of Celebration Japan, maybe some local con talk, and of course, we're now in between Skeleton Crew and Andor Season 2, so we've got a lot to talk about, and if we find some other things, of course, we're talking about Star Wars Card Trader, we got some cards that we're kind of chasing and whatnot, but I am kind of curious, and I'll start with Daz first. Let's, since Skeleton Crew is going to be fresh in your mind, what did you think of the series, and what were some highlights for you?
I really enjoyed it. Start by saying that it didn't blow me away completely, but it more than did its job as as far as I was concerned. I'm really glad that in the lead up to it, there was a lot of talk of Goonies, E.T., and all these things. And whilst I think that we did get a flavor of them and maybe a little bit of the spirit of them, I am glad that Skeleton Crew sort of went its own way to a large extent and just picked up some of these features as it went on, some nods, those nostalgic nods as it went along. But I'm glad it didn't get too bogged down in that, and overall it just focused on what I'd say is a very self-contained story. I think that it flowed well all the way through, with great character work all the way through. Early on, we weren't sure if we were going to get the full, a good idea of the various characters. Early on, we perhaps were seeing sort of a Wim heavy, a Fern particularly as well. We were wondering, are we going to get any, detail on KB? We were all guessing about her in particular. We shouldn't have worried. They took care of that really nice way all the way through. The overall story, I did enjoy that they wrapped up the story. I was thinking, oh please, let's not put this down to chance that we need any more. If we get some more, then fantastic. But if we don't, I think that this is something that we can revisit over and over again and have that sort of satisfying feeling at the end of it that we know how the story ended. I've no doubt that we're going to see some of these characters again. Perhaps Jod's may be the more obvious one for us to see, but I'm kind of hoping that we're going to see some of these kids all grown up and see how they've come along since this first adventure.
Frank, we had you on Breakfast Pack for episode number 5. I am kind of curious. We were, pretty keen on it at that time. How did the series finish for you?
Let me start off by saying I'm surprised you want to speak about that again. We saw what happens when the teacher's not in the room. You invited Aaron Harris and me along, and we got very carried away and had a great time. I'm agreeing a lot with Daz there. I loved Skeleton Crew. I thought it was great. I think they did a really good job launching it before Christmas. It was a really nice, where it was that kind of child-friendly, on the whole, family kind of themed Star Wars story. Again, as Daz was just saying there, very self-contained. If anybody were to happen upon that, the only real hints that it was a Star Wars story was a couple of X-Wings and a lightsaber. I think it's a really good access point for anybody, especially younger ones who might want to join mum, dad, or whoever on the sofa and watch some Star Wars. I think it's perfect for that. I'm hoping for more. Like you're saying, it's right now there's no suggestion of a second season, but we've probably all seen, I don't remember the name of the actor, but there was some footage filmed of Jod's Jedi Master, and she'd put some pictures out on Instagram and some social media. So very often those things don't go unused. So I'm hoping maybe those pop back up sometime in the future, whether it's a second season of Skeleton Crew or something different from Skeleton Crew. Although we're hearing there's going to be some time with some of the characters, possibly in future projects. I'm not saying anything new when I say the child actors in this were phenomenal. I mean, they very much, in many cases, upstage the adults on the screen. I know Jude Law is a phenomenon, but but I thought they all held their own very, very well, and the quality of acting was absolutely first class.
I want to pick up on something, and I'll start with Des on this, but I'm glad you brought that up about that, what would have been maybe a fuller flashback scene with, the actual Jedi Master that Jod had alluded to. And I'm wondering, and I think we talked about it a little bit, but I wanted to get your opinion on it. Had we seen a more fleshed out, longer flashback, Daz, would that have kind of taken you out of that moment, or would you have just gobbled it up going, because we saw, especially with the Keller and Beck, material that we have seen, some of, Reva stuff and Obi-Wan and whatnot, where it, when you're seeing live action, let's say you're seeing clones and maybe you're seeing a little bit of Order 66, how do you kind of fall on the side of would it have been better, or was it better to be left on the cutting room floor, except for the fact she probably didn't get paid for it?
Yeah. Well, I would have gobbled it up. I've no doubt. I would have absolutely devoured it. Add more to the sort of background that we know. We don't see many Jedi really, although the number is increasing after Order 66. So it sounds like that Jedi that picked up job was sort of down and out a little bit. It would have been interesting to see that. Thinking of Obi-Wan and in the desert, perhaps shades of that. But whilst I would have gobbled it up, I'm kind of glad that we didn't go there. I think it would have been a distraction in that last episode, and I think it would have been a disservice to the story that the kids had portrayed so well. I think that something like that is always in danger of stealing the show, which on one hand you can think of, oh yeah, that's great, it's a memorable moment for us all to talk about, but I think the way that the route that we went down will keep us talking about the series as a whole, as opposed to the sort of classic sort of what we normally get from the cameos, whereas in this case it might be a bit more, well, we've gone this many episodes without any Jedi, and then we get this big flashy flashback. And plus, I also think that Jude's performance didn't really require the flashback. I think that he conveyed not only enough of the story in what he said, but also the emotion that you can see that he's feeling, that sort of bitterness, and how that over the years, what was probably a spark of hope for him has turned into something quite the opposite.
What do you think, Frank? Well said.
Yeah, I agree totally. I mean, it seems that they intentionally kept Jod still, even at the end of the series, a bit of an enigma. It's people have commented, I've seen and noticed, you see an expression this way, which is quite the opposite of what he was speaking about just a moment earlier. So to keep a character like that, and again with the performer Jude Law on the books for some possible future enterprises, to keep it like up in the air was a good call. Absolutely was.
I'm also curious, and I've been kind of trying to rack my brain as far as it didn't necessarily sound like that the producers of the show were, I mean, maybe you had an eye on future seasons, but it didn't necessarily sound like anything was written yet. I'm kind of wondering, how do you write yourself out of this to take advantage? I mean, this show takes advantage of the kind of the 80s Amblin nostalgia, but the fact that you're putting kids in sort of a first time situation, and they really rolled well. But I'm wondering how a second season even is kind of put together, as much as we all would like to see bits or all characters involved. I'm wondering, how do you what kind of magic can you recapture if you have a second season? And maybe this is why there was not a Goonies 2, or in some cases an E.T. 2. How do you get them without just regurgitating a lot of this, but still have an original story?
Well, what we're seeing more and more now, of course, is when a story's needed continuation, it often winds up in print, whether that be publishing through novels, or comic books more often seems to be the case nowadays. You can expand out without the expense, it would seem, of putting something on screen. And I think that gives the writers and, of course, all the artists a lot more freedom to explore where they go when it is over, say, many months of a comic book series or over several novels. So that gives a lot of a lot of scope for expanding stories if you want to. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's to the credit of the guys who made this that it doesn't fit super smooth into perhaps a sequel. They didn't get too bogged down in that. They didn't worry about that. They had a story they wanted to tell, and they told it without sort of the shackles of trying to leave these maybe loose ends or storylines that can continue. It it's strange because from what I understand that this is part of the sort of Mandoverse, perhaps leading eventually into the movie that Dave Filoni is going to be making. I can't imagine at the moment how they go from this adventure into something that feels sort of coherent with all of the other stories. You guys have any ideas like how we could eventually end up with a position with these guys showing up?
I have nothing on that question. Thing about how you say that piece of the puzzle fits in, there's nothing clear right now. The only two real mysteries in my mind are, we still don't really know the purpose of all these hidden planets. Now, okay, we had this mint or this money on this planet, so that would give a good reason for hiding that away. But when there was several planets hidden, and we've seen one very much in its broken down current version that must have, I assume, at some point have started off like Tatin did. That mystery, I'm not sure if we're going to find out any more than that it was to keep money safe. Like it was basically a big intergalactic safe for cash. So, yeah, how it's going to fit in, I don't know. And it's one of those things where it could be a very small detail, that the actual story itself could be told, and that's that. And it's just this feature about these hidden planets and why that needed to happen, when it happened more so, because that's still kind of up in the air. I know people have put it into kind of the timeline roughly. It's kind of this many years after this and a few years before that, but it's still kind of, there's a lot of gray area there. So yeah, it might just be a detail or two. That's what I'd imagine seeing come up.
I like that there are a lot of threads that you could follow, right? You could explore more on Anat, if they're trying to find, Jod's gone off and there was an adventure within the vaults, and you go, okay, you get a little, raiders or something where it's plausible that they're still on the planet, they haven't left, but there is a mystery within there. I love picking up the threads on an Akron or some of these other planets where they were able to, maybe through Kim's help, find some of the other, help some of the other kids or explore some of the other planets to learn more about, like the self-contained universe of the 9 planets of wonder, or I forget, the jewels of the Old Republic, which I think are also, good fodder if you wanted to have some books or other things on the side that explored areas without even having to worry about the kids, just some other introduce some new characters and how they get out, the girl from at Akron. That would be kind of interesting. The one thing I think that works in their benefit is the fact that because this was shot so long ago, the kids are going to be naturally older by the time, something maybe gets announced they worked in. So the older they get, the more plausible further adventures get, rather than, and it's a nice thing, they're not always going to be 11 and 12. So you could see them, maybe take on another slash genre. I mean, Stranger Things, although it's not, I don't really follow it, somehow manages to work as the kids get older, and the stories maybe kind of come up to that. So, maybe age and a little time does help all this sort of naturally fall into place.
Yeah, but perhaps after time, we'd all love to see all of these characters again, but perhaps that's a little bit too much. Maybe there's going to be more obvious candidates. I think Jod's always going to be at the forefront because there's no way you're keeping that guy in prison if that's indeed where he ended up. He's a slippery eel. There's no chance of keeping him behind bars. He's the most obvious. And then the way that the series should we say call it the season at the moment? With Wim watching the ships, I was thinking, are we seeing the sort of flicker of a young pilot's eyes there at the beginning? Perhaps that's a good way for an older Wim to show up later in the Mundoverse.
Frank, the question I almost have to ask is, is Jude Law becoming the national treasure that Michael Caine is, and that you put Michael Caine in anything and it's worth watching?
I want to mention, like it's been spoken about on one of your shows previously, Stephen Fry turning
Yes.
up, voicing the supervisor. It was a supervisor or superintendent? I think it was supervisor.
Supervisor, yeah.
Yeah, that was marvelous. When I saw that, I saw Panther Tracks. That was Stephen Fry, and I went back and watched it again. Of course, it was. Yeah, absolutely, it was. So, so to have Stephen Fry in the Star Wars universe now is a thrill to me. He's one of my favorite guys off of British TV. Jude Law, he holds his own wherever he goes, and I've seen more movies now that have just popped up, and I think now that he's in the public eye again, the last one movie I remember that really stuck in my mind is pretty old, which is AI, when he was in that. So I've not seen an awful lot of his movies, but he does steal most of the scenes he's in, and I'm sure that's something that his career is going to continue doing. So Michael Caine, Jude Law, Stephen Fry, it's a funny trio, but love them all. They're all great.
I'm glad you did mention Stephen Fry, because I think that there's a great way to have a cameo from a well-known person without it really detracting. Not that, like I said, and this kind of comes up because I was going to be mentioning that, Dan's Era Coffee with Kenobi had myself, Greg Cass, another fella on whose names I'm just forgetting at the moment. But, in ranking the shows, and as we're recording, the shows the second part hasn't aired yet, but it was kind of interesting that the Mando season 3 episode with, Jack Black comes up, and whereas, I enjoyed the episode, there was kind of, the cameos were sort of like notable. It was really hard for them to kind of be in the background. I think that it was nice that Stephen Fry could come in and really add something to it without necessarily taking away from the moment. We were all going to be surprised that it was the supervisor was a droid, but it was nice that you could have gotten a lot of folks to be the droid, but it was very cool that it was Stephen Fry.
Yeah, no, I agree. I didn't even realize either the first time of listening to it, and it was just because it wasn't in your face too much, but then it's one of those on the rewatch you really catch. Oh yeah, okay, that you can see the reason why they chose him. It's a good voice for the part.
Yeah, and like Greg was saying, not having him on screen was a good move. He was in one of the Hobbit movies, and when you see him, he's an outstanding performer, an outstanding orator, but you see Stephen Fry primarily, and just have this voice in place. And in that particular role in Skeleton Crew, it was a very passive delivery, but some very serious things, like when he calls Jod out. Well, you either are a traitor or you're a liar, but that wasn't necessarily seen coming because the supervisor seemed so polite. Oh, welcome, undersecretary, this kind of thing. So there was that little biting dialogue there that Stephen Fry is an expert in delivering. Yeah,
I suppose a lot of people out there, perhaps especially the younger audience, one of their main exposures to Stephen Fry over the years has been the Harry Potter audiobooks, which he's quite famous in narrating. So quite interesting that he ended up with a role that was sort of a voiceover only. I'm sure that some ears will have pricked up on that.
Oh, and I just wanted to say it's Bob Gerard, who's a podcast short for a stormtrooper. He was, I think he is in the CWK community, and I know he's been, Dan Zer's been on some of his shows. But yeah, and speaking of which, and as we kind of we'll bring this topic to a close. It's interesting having covered, another show for the Breakfast Pack. Greg Cass and I, with a cast of different folks, we kind of try to pull in from the community. Doing one of those, doing a stretch of those is like kind of pulling a rubber band, where it's like you're trying to hit a particular schedule. Now, if you're a good podcaster, and this is Star Wars Podcast Day, you're doing it on a regular schedule anyway. But the shows tend to highlight that, and also making sure that you're trying to find extra guests, or you're hitting, and especially this show for this time was hitting over the holidays, and so it was a little trickier than normal. We'll have a similar thing when Andor season 2 comes up, whereas it's going to be a much longer series. It's going to be, like you'll probably see shows 1 to 2, and we'll get into that during our Andor, maybe Andor part, that'll come out at the same time, and then you get several weeks, and so it'll be a little more of a marathon in that, just like kind of like with the Bad Batch. But putting it to you folks, who I also listen and appear on podcasts as well, isn't it interesting when the shows end? Sometimes there's a wrap episode or so forth, but it's almost like a rubber band kind of breaking in that. I think everyone kind of scrambles to go, all right, what kind of Star Wars podcasts do I want to kind of listen to now? And it's probably interesting when you start seeing things pop up in your list, Frank and Daz. What are some things you're kind of looking for listening? Like, oh yeah, I just finished that. It's like having a good meal. What do you kind of take as a chaser? And have you noticed that every time the series ends, it is a little jarring to kind of get back on track?
What do you think, Frank?
So it's funny being with Greg today. One of the things that drew me to the Rebel Base Card podcast was how it wasn't dependent on what media was available at any given time. Being a trading card collecting community podcast was ideal for any given moment. I've been listening for years now, as Daz has and countless others, and there's always going to be some new product out. Or as Greg, if you've managed to attract artists or people involved with the Card Trader app, the people behind the scenes. So I like that very much. The thing that drew me to Coffee with Kenobi was when Dan was the first ones I ever heard. He was delving deeply into the mythology that has parallels with Star Wars, and that was really engaging. So I like all of that different, a real good mix of content. Like you say, it's kind of easy when there's some weekly show or a new movie coming out. That makes everyone's life really easy. But when there is that little drought, when there's several months or a year or so between these media, events, that's where the hard work comes in. I feel anyway. That's how it seems. So I'm just want at that point something different. And when there is, like we've just finished Skeleton Crew, of course, there's 1,000 different people talking about Skeleton Crew, which is great. And of course, you latch onto the ones that resonate most with you. You'll hear, I'll listen to 2 or 3, maybe 4 or 5, depending on how long an episode was, to see what everyone's different takes on things were and where they joined up and where they diverged as well. So keeping it fresh with a whole mix of content is what keeps it all fresh to me. So you can kind of pick and choose at any given moment. And of course, the ones that aren't necessarily hinged on a current product, they're kind of, I think I've heard you, Greg, call them evergreen. There's some things you can go back to and listen to again and again. If there's something you want to hear about the Chrome, Galaxy set from 3 years ago, because you've just started collecting it now, which is because I'll typically do that. When those Chrome sets and the Galaxy sets come out, they're always incredibly expensive day one. So I will try and pick up a few autos or some inserts, then go back to get the base set later. So to be able to go back and listen and get a little bit of the background on that set and some collecting tips and such is always nice to do as well.
It's an interesting rhythm, isn't it, when the shows come into play with the podcasts. They sort of have this sort of strange relationship with each other in that it does pull podcasts into line with each other for a period of time. And whilst they all don't sound the same, you can pick up anyone that week and you kind of know what you're going to get. I think for me, like once the shows are over, I sometimes think you can sense a certain amount of like show fatigue in the podcast because it is, these guys have got their jobs, they're real jobs to do as well, and particularly some of the sort of longer period of series, such as things like Bad Batch, which can sort of seem to go on for like a long period of time. And I think that for me, of course, it depends on what the podcaster themselves wants to get out of their show. But for me, I think that if they go back to what they're passionate about, they're probably not going to go too far wrong, because that's going to ignite the fire in them. It's going to instantly give you a certain amount of individuality. We all want to listen to podcasts that give us something different, and whether it be with Greg and Cards, I'm thinking, the guys over at Reactions, they perhaps go let David go a little bit deeper into the psychology, things that you just won't hear anywhere else. The guys at Blast Points, and they're quirky little elements of Star Wars that you hadn't ever thought about before, and somehow they can produce like an enthralling 2 hour deep dive into the somebody's George Lucas's hair or something like that. So I think I think that for me it's almost not so much what the podcast listener wants to hear, and more for the podcaster themselves to think about what they want to say, because I think there'll always be an audience for that.
And it's also interesting where, I kind of, I think after you do this for a little while and you kind of see, like when a show kind of comes in, like when a show gets on, and Greg and I'll do it, sometimes it gets a little tricky to kind of do both shows at the same time. And so trying to find a balance between, like, I want to try to get some other content, especially if you have a long season like a Bad Batch, or if you have Andor, where I don't necessarily know if I want to go 2 months or so without doing, or like a long time without doing some kind of collector, if I'm either going to an event, a con, or a collector, or a news set, or talking to somebody. But I kind of find myself wondering if my audience, there is a limited number of time, but if I release almost too many shows, then you kind of have a law, I think, of diminishing returns where, all right, I've seen things where if it averages out to about maybe one a week, then things work out and you kind of fall in, like, because this is a niche podcast, it falls in, it goes in line with, you've got your main ones, your Coffee with Kenobis, or if you have your Cantina Cast, or if the folks are listening to RFR, that kind of stuff, where you have the main ones. Blast Points is another good one, and then Thank the Maker is another great one. But then you kind of fall in going, okay, I fit here, but if you have too many, then I'll start to see, like, you get later on, you get comments going from listeners going, hey, it was great, but they listened to your show, weeks later. And so sometimes it's nice, Frank, when you're talking about like evergreen content, but also it's nice in kind of this case where like February will be a little more, February and March as it goes forward will be a little more normal than January, because we had all that Steam and Star Wars content, which is awesome. But then you have Steam going into, Skeleton Crew, and then all of a sudden I go, if I get too much, let's let everybody, and I'll see that. Like a lot of times if I allow a little space, if we've just gone through a lot, and I'll start to see, listens kind of tick up, and okay, now it's kind of back, and now it's just kind of finding, Daz, it's kind of finding that rhythm of, all right, I've got some topics to talk about. We're doing a homestead keeping where I've got some news and notes. There's a good place for this, and then it'll be, like some artists, getting them back into the fold, and then pretty soon we'll be talking about Celebration. And I think that's maybe the one, maybe as listeners and folks who've talked about Celebration, that's pretty much one unifying event that I don't think anyone really gets tired of listening to, whether you're going or not. What do you guys think when it comes to Celebration and podcasts? What are some of the things that you're going to be excited to hear or see?
No, I think that we all go into Celebration sort of expecting the unexpected, because Lucasfilm aren't daft. They know that the whole of the Star Wars community is sort of saving up to this sort of Christmas event, of waiting for news, and so I think that they hold stuff back, and they sort of they know what they're doing. They keep us keen on announcements, and I think that's what I'm looking forward to. Is like, what do we not know? Because we do go through periods where we don't hear anything for a while, and we seem to be getting some sort of strange little tidbits of news at the moment to do with movies, and it's from various sources, although reputable. Like the Hollywood Reporters broke a story, I think, this week. I can't remember what that one was. It might have been the Ryan Gosling story. It's nice to hear the news straight from the horse's mouth, as they say. So for me, it's that sort of unknown that I'm most excited about. What are we going to hear? What do we not know about? There's going to be some drop the mic moments, and that's my big thing, I'd say.
What about
How
yourself,
about you, Frank?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing who gets drawn in. You know, the bigger names always turn up on the Star Wars live stage, where they talk about their past projects, what's coming up, and they got to keep tight-lipped about it. This one, with it being in Japan, of course, such a long way away, it's going to be fantastic to see what people are experiencing there. The chance to live vicariously through their social media, podcasts. Like Daz was saying, the things that kind of people expect to be coming up as announcements, getting dropped, and then those things that come out of left field completely blindsiding people. That's always nice as well. More often than not, they're able to keep something a complete secret, and it just explodes at celebration. So they've made an event where they're able to, again, just like you just talked about various podcasts, deliver something for everybody in the Star Wars fan community. But between that and then everyone just getting to spend some time together who have maybe never met, it's always fun hearing about that. The people who have like, oh, I've been following this person for the longest time. Then suddenly you see someone who's attending. There's a photograph in their feed that's saying, "Hey, look who I've just met after following for 5 years and talking to online every day." So as well as the organizers, the attendees bring a lot to it as well, and to get to see what happens from that part of the world is going to be wonderful. And of course, just with how societally different it will be from another country, that's completely alien to what we would expect in the UK or here in the US. It's going to be really wonderful, and I think fresh in a way that none of the others have been so far.
And I think also the key to, if you are not attending Celebration, is make sure your friends are wearing the right swag. Because when I saw Daz wearing the Colby Cash shirt, I was like, you know what, Colby, you got something there. There's nothing like mobile advertising in a celebration. And all I need to know, Daz, is what are your hourly rates for wearing a T-shirt at Star Wars Celebration?
They're more reasonable than you'd expect, Well, I'll have to talk to you after this, Greg, and we can maybe work something out. To be honest, I've already been perusing TeePublic recently, thinking about what I'm going to be wearing in Japan. So they're going to be getting some of my hard-earned money in preparation for it. It's so funny thinking about the whole celebration being in a very well, unusual place compared to usual. I was talking to somebody this week about a non-Star Wars fan, when they speak to you about your upcoming trip to Star Wars Celebration, they want to hear about Japan, and I hadn't really thought about Japan. I had an initial burst of excitement at Japan initially, but it does goes to show like how involved we can get in Celebration no matter where it is. I've been so focused on Celebration, I really feel like I've taken my eye off the country it's being held in, and I will be ready by that time. But I've got so much preparation to do. Anybody who knows anything about Japan who spoke to me would really doubt that I'm going at all, because I don't know where anything is. I don't really know how I'm getting anywhere. I've got my hotels booked. We're going to be staying in a robot hotel, run by, the desk is going to be manned by dinosaurs wearing little caps. And what is this crazy place I'm going to? I'm so excited for that. We've booked some trips. We're going to try and go to Kyoto, but beyond the sort of top level things, I really need to start thinking about the country and how I'm going to get about. Might not even make it to Celebration at this rate. I'll be just stuck in the airport trying to figure out what's going on.
Which way which way is your flight going?
Yeah,
we're really early.
I don't really know. I'm going direct. I didn't worry about which way it's going.
Oh, that's true. Okay.
Yeah. So I want to say we're going over Europe that way.
Oh, okay. Okay, I see.
Yeah. Greg, you're really exposing my terrible geography now.
No. You have to remember, Americans in geography don't really, we have varying ideas of just how big Greenland is, and so you really can't trust it as far as geography and the metric system, for that matter. I think actually us and the UK is the only one, and I know there's some other countries, but once again, I have no idea what those other countries are that have the British system of, Whatever. See, that's why I'm into podcasting, right? This is why you're listening to this, because of the gold that I can spew out of my mouth. But that is interesting, because I think it's hard to really, I think you're right. I think it's hard to really kind of think about what's happening, because everything's going to be so different. I remember, being in the Pacific, we were about 3 hours away from Japan. And, whatever you see when you see like Tokyo and all that, it's sort of like, well, imagine like New York, the city of New York at 11, everything is just way more intense. And of course, like maybe you can fake it in like, say, France or Italy, or a country that is using, language that, okay, I could probably figure that out. I could probably go back to my high school German and could probably figure my way around, but this is going to be completely different. But I do remember like going through Narita, which is actually north. I think it's the airport that's closer to the Chiba Center, which is where the celebration is. So there are trains, and as long as you kind of, I think, allow yourself a little more time. And I like also the fact that I'm hearing that you're not just traveling all that way to be in a place inside for X number of days. You're intending to see some of the rest of Japan.
Yeah, we're going to see as much as we can, but we are only there for a week. It's going to be no time at all. I think I'm hoping that at some point I'm going to bump into Ross, and I know that guy's going to be on top of everything, and I think that I'll just be getting as much information as I can from him. I know he's been I feared that he was learning some Japanese, all sensible things, not things I've been doing, but I really hope that with the convention that they are going to lean heavily into the sort of the country that's hosting it. We can already see on the artwork that there, obviously is like a really strong Japanese flavor to those sort of Star Wars images, which I think just looks so cool. And I hope when we're there, it's not going to feel too much like we've just dropped a celebration into Japan, but it could be anywhere. Whilst they're probably going to bamboozle me with it, I hope that it's as Japanese as possible.
It is kind of interesting. I think we're going to have to task you and Ross with both going, if we don't get a picture of the two of you together, photoshopping is not allowed in this. We do need to see it. And then also, I think we found out, Frank, we have now two correspondents. We have Daz and Ross in Japan. So there's going to be these really weak FaceTime audio and or video calls. Daz is familiar with this with this little exercise.
We've done this before, Greg. It's not a problem.
And I also know that it's a really, I think it was while I was over there, I think it's about a 12-hour difference. It's going to be really crazy as far as the time difference. And so some of those live panels are going to be super interesting to see. But yet I think, Mary's going to be having the whole thing on. I don't think she's just going to turn her computer off during the entire celebration. It'll just be one thing. We'll probably have to have some kind of like just ongoing Zoom call that people will just dive in and out of. But
I think I'll be touching base with Mary because I think she'll know better than me what's going on there anyway. So that might be one of the first things I do in the morning.
That's very smart. That's very smart. I know we're going to be revisiting Celebration over and over, and then we're going to all put in our lists of what we're going to make Daz and or Ross bring us back from the Celebration store, where, I think the only nice thing is that, hey, I don't have to wait in line this year. We're just going to like rely on the kindness of these two wonderful people to go, would you mind standing in line for 2 hours to get me a pin? And you're going to be like, I hate you, but fine. This will be the last thing that we'll do, but great. This is what I need. I spent thousands of dollars and now I'm a Sherpa. Thank you very much. Anyway.
This could be the start of a new series as well, Daz and Ross, roving reporters.
One who knows what he's doing and one who's completely inept.
Oh my gosh. There's a road trip movie right there. I mean, this is, Daz, I'm telling you, if you were wondering, if you ever thought of like diving into the podcast realm, this is what it is. You're just going to attach yourself. But no, that's a nice thing, because I think going to celebrations, Frank, you know this, Daz, you know this, every time you go to another one, it's going to be like old home week, right? I mean, it's just, you see more people
Yeah. No, that's great. It's one of my favorite things, definitely seeing people that you connect with all the time. It's nothing like seeing them in real life and, getting to have that hug and just sort of just chat nicely. And it's what it's all about. Remind us that we're just all real people at the end of the day.
Exactly. Well, Frank, you are a real person that spent real money on the Hasbro HasLab Ghost. I know we talked about it a little bit the last time we had you on, but I keep staring at this thing over your shoulder. It looks gorgeous. I think I am ready. I think we are ready for sort of the full review of this. And so do what you do so well, because I know it had to be a joy to pull that thing out of the boxes and start slapping it together.
Yeah, we spoke a little bit some weeks ago about it when it had just been delivered, and at that point it was still in the box. So getting it out was a joy. We'd spoken at the time, and I think most people have seen now on social media how well this was packaged. It seemed that Hasbro wanted to leave no chance of this thing being damaged anyway, along its journey. So it came in a box, in a box, in a box, and one of the nicest things about it, of course, people love their carded figures. I'm an on-card collector. Some people not so much, and I've seen several people with their Ghost crew set up in the ship itself. But one of the boxes, I'm not sure how well distributed this information was. One of the boxes in the large box was the carded figures. So they came protected in a way that I don't think any of the previous ones had done. The Razor Crest, it was the complaint, but a few people have said that their cards were slightly warped. Mine weren't. There was an easy fix for just getting star cases or figure shields, something along that way, and leaving them in there for a while. But this one's a beauty. I mean, I had an idea where I was going to put it. I wasn't sure if it was going to fit, but it did. But it really is a monster. It genuinely is a monstrous thing. I'm not sure where they go with Star Wars after this, because I think for years people were hoping a Ghost was going to happen, and when it happened, there was a lot of joy and celebration about that. So where they go from this, I don't know. I'm always hesitant to say where I'd like it to go, because historically Disney has destroyed the ships I like so much. So I had the Razor Crest, it got destroyed. And characters. I love Tech, and Tech was killed off. So I would actually like to see Havoc Marauder next. Would be a great ship. But this one, I couldn't have wished for more. I really couldn't. What would be nice? It comes with a Phantom 2 that connects to the top. And what would be nice if they made a compatible Phantom, original Phantom as well? That'd be nice too. But yeah, this is a great one. I think most of them have got to where they were going now. I know there was some upset about delays. Mine, I think, got to me a little ahead of when it was supposed to, but some people were still waiting into the month just past. I see there's a gentleman, Mr. Stevie, on Instagram, and he's always got a lot of information. He puts out a lot of links about things if people are concerned about their shipments seem to take longer than they would be expected to. So he's always a really good resource. But yeah, this one, it puts the Razor Crest to shame. The box that it came in is easily 4 or 5 times as big. And, looking from one side at the Razor Crest to this one, they bear no relation in what you see on the shelf. It's a huge collectible.
I'm also wondering, you're talking about the packaging as well, as far as the carded figures. I wonder, just because the fact that there were so many carded figures, as opposed to the Razor Crest, that a little more care and feeding was kind of put into it. But I want to key on what you're talking about as far as like maybe some pent up demand for this. We did see one of the HasLabs, I think it was the Rancor, that did not fund. But it's interesting you talking about like where do they go from here, and as much as in my line of work where we talk about cards and the escalating cost of like a hobby box, right? The latest that's out is high tech, and I know we have another high end release that's out where it might be like a pack or a card or like an auto per box, right? If we go back to the stellar signatures or whatnot. But something that I keep kind of saying is that, I think a lot of folks that put in for the HasLab Ghost were serious collectors. Mm-hmm. But I'm sure even someone like Daz, who I'm just going to throw into the bus on this one, who was probably like, I think it's one of those things where even you might have even thought once or twice, even though you're not like, this is not what I'm into, but it comes out and you're looking at it going, how much is it again? But that's something that I kind of like tops to see is going like, the Ghost was no small purchase, but I think a lot of folks who maybe wouldn't consider themselves hardcore, I've got to have everything, kind of looked at it and go, I can scrounge up that kind of bucks, like that kind of money, and I have that much time to pay it off. It is kind of interesting to see, all right, A, what's going forward, and B, Daz, when this kind of came out, you're like, when you're thinking about like the limited space and how much I have to spend on this, you may have thought once or twice about this.
Yeah,
Let's be honest.
It's true. It's true. I did I was kind of okay when I saw the material going out when the release was being mooted and people were beginning to jump on board. Do you know the best commercial for it has been the people receiving them, seeing the excitement on people's faces, seeing the pictures on Instagram, and do you know what? I don't want to say I'm full of regret, but it is. It's absolutely beautiful, and I can see how much the people who have received them are enjoying them, and how much they're looking forward to the delivery arriving. I think that it's interesting to think about the Ghost as well. Like, it shows how beloved that show was, isn't it? We're a few years out, and this is a really big release, and it just goes to show how much of a legacy that show still has. Yes, the ship's shown up a few, here and there in live action, but never long enough for us to have a good look at it, really. It just they can put this out, and there's a market out there for it. It speaks a lot about how much people feel about that ship, and yeah, I'm going to be honest, I'm pretty jealous.
But even then, on as a follow-up question, even if you're not like, even if one doesn't say, like, I talk to collectors who have full rooms and wings and whatnot, and those, like I said, who have I have a shelf, I have this, I have that. But when you're thinking about Celebration coming up, it's not like you're not like, yes, there's the outlay of the coin to get there. You're bringing something home. There's no way you're not bringing something home. Swag aside, good swag to be had. But I am curious when you start thinking about, and we'll go to Frank after this, as far as like, even if you're filling up, like I'd say your shelf is very eloquently placed, but you have to start thinking, even in your back of your head, I'm not a serious collector, but what's next? Because it doesn't seem to ever stop. Daz, what might be something that you go, okay, this is a little maybe bigger, maybe this is a little more expensive than I have, but this is filling a hole in my life right now that may not cost me a divorce.
Well, for me, the thing the sort of last 12 months has been the helmets. I've really got a really bad bug for the Black Series helmets. Honestly, I'm waking up sometimes and I'm checking my phone. I'm like, I didn't order this. Like, I think I'm having blackouts where I'm ordering these helmets. I think luckily I'm a little bit limited by the shelving space I've got at the moment for those, and I've pretty much I've reached down to the floor. So there's gonna be no more of those. Thinking about like what's next. I've begun to dabble in the cards since I've met you, Greg. Just completely unexpected. I am looking at sort of older sets I should say, not that old, but you got me started on the sort of prequel sets, and I was trawling through eBay looking for either full sets or partial sets that I could build together. And it is something that I definitely want to push on more with. I'm not sure that at the moment I'm at a point where I'm able to largely do. It sounds a bit silly when you just bought loads of helmets, but if I start buying the new card packs at this point, I think that I could be in big trouble. And I'm quite happy to watch the new packs being opened by people I know on lives on Instagram. I completely enjoy that. The card trader really helps me on that front because it gives me that little bit of something without me having to part with too much proper cash. Even though I must say the seasons catches me. I don't. I guess you guys may be above a $10 on the sort of the season premium fee, whereas over here it's £10, and pretty much every month £10 goes out for me to have those lovely crystals for me to go pick up some of the nice more elite cards in there. I think in Japan I'll be on the lookout for a card. I'll be on the lookout for artwork, hopefully by some local artists over there. It's maybe something I can't find anywhere else, and I've got some wall space here. I can definitely put up some pictures in frames, so perhaps that's my next focus.
Frank, I'd have to say, yes, the Ghost took up a lot of space, and you may have already thought about, could I mount this to the wall or could I hang it from the ceiling? But I am kind of curious, once this all kind of went up, did you kind of have to reset a little bit as far as like, all right, that, this was a special thing. Obviously, I had no regrets, but as far as collecting going forward, has it sort of influenced about things you're thinking about, or is it just full steam ahead?
It's a little of both, to be fair, depending on what particular type of collectible it is. So for the Ghost, I had a couple of valuable Funko Pops, so I moved those along to fund the Ghost. So that seemed to be a good trade-off. A couple of Funkos that I wasn't particularly fond of, but were desirable. I managed to sell those, and that paid for the Ghost. So that was really a good place to have been in. Just go back a little. You were saying about how the Ghost has turned up in live action and such. It is an Ahsoka box. When you get it, it does say Star Wars Ahsoka. However, the figures have those mural card backs, so there's that nod back as well to the fact that it was originally from Rebels. When it comes to collecting, right now I'm actually on a little bit of a mystery mini bump. So they've just released recently a second series of Mandalorian mystery minis. They're not easy to find. I've got a couple. Cards, again, like Daz was saying, cards is a slippery slope. What I've done and what Greg, I see you do often as well, is piecemeal stuff. Get a few where you can, build as much of a set or as much of the product as you want, and then try and bulk it back out to being a full set or something later on when it's all cooled down a little bit. I collect autograph cards as well. And you can get those at a steal. When you see some of the releases of autograph cards, like you're saying, like the Signature Series or Masterworks and such like that, which are high-end, real premium cards, breakers seem to be buying in a massive amount, of course, as they do. And the stuff that isn't like the top tier of most desirable actors, that they move on a bargain often. So that's how I bulk that particular part of my collection out. I did go through a period of collecting the Hot Wheels Starships as well, and I think they've moved away from those a little now into a more premium type of larger ship with the little figures and such, which are great. I don't have any of those. I kind of stopped when they went off the little cards that were maybe $5 or $6. We have a shelf in here that we call our fleet, and there's and it's lovely. You just a little representation of something that wasn't expensive, and that's the point of it. You don't have to go for crazy expensive collectibles. I love what Daz was saying about collecting something local. It was some time ago, Greg, when I was on with you and Greg Cass, and I remember we were talking about creators at the time, and nothing's popped to mind when he was talking about artists. And all I had to do was look up, and I've got a Jason Christman right above where I'm sitting now, and he's one of my favorite artists. He works with light and shadow. When Daz is in Japan, I'm sure there's going to be some very specific to that part of the world art that would be unavailable anywhere else. So I can't wait to see what he picks up to hang on his walls. That's going to be wonderful to see that kind of influence of that society.
And also seeing
a bit of show and tell.
Yes.
I know Blast Point's already changed their logo, and they have Star. I think it's Blast Points in the Japanese script, and I'm already like, oh, that's just going to be the celebration that's going to launch 1 million very cool T-shirts. Which would be something I would probably be looking for to come back, or whether it was like a poster or something along those lines. Not having the card sets, we had only a few releases last year, but it does sort of allow you to go, like one, you can you don't feel like one's just right on top of each other in that I have to, I'm going after hobby box after hobby box, but it does allow me to kind of like go back. Like recently I've gone through and I've kind of been organizing, I had the Galaxy that I had to kind of put in binders. Some of the throwback Thursdays from last year, I got on right near the end on some of those. So it does kind of allow you to kind of start to shuffle around. And I was kind of looking at my shelf going, you know what, especially picking up the 77 lunchbox. And I go, well, there's a piece where like my little mini shelf was starting to get a little overgrown. And I'm like, I might archive some of that away. I hate saying box away. Archive some of that away because I think some of these other pieces look a whole lot nicer. Like I think Daz's shelf is one I kind of might aspire to, where like, A, it's a gorgeous shelf itself. B, but also, you start to kind of go, what really do I want to see when I go in my, in your room, your happy place, and you have stuff that's out, and there is this fine line kind of between clutter, everything that makes me happy, and if I could just make it look a little more nice, even, functioning within, right? Like in Frank's room, that's where one of the computers are. And so, I just smile every time I look at his background because, like I have to have a piece of art because I have a Carter kitchen. Here I've seen the Ghost. I'm seeing some of the Funkos on the wall. I see a very nice bookshelf. I love the Macquarie art back there, but there's a little bit of form and function back there, but it also is something I think that kind of goes, all right, it's not just one of those where it's just like wall to wall Black Series. But as well, just one, and one last thing is I was just kind of thinking about it. Sorry, I was taking a get the coffee going. These gaps in between like major releases or things allow for things like I've been diving into the Star Wars weeklies, which is really great, and going back and getting those old, those UK releases of the Marvel run of comics that came out, and so they're larger, they're black and white, they have sub stories in them, and a lot of great additional artwork because in the US it was monthly, in the UK it was weekly. I'm trying to figure out, and I don't know, Frank, did you ever pick up any of those when they were out? I know, like I said, back in the day, it probably would have been harder to find anything, but I'm sure there was a newsstand here or there. Did you see those out, and did you ever collect any of them?
I did not back then. I did have some of the bubblegum cards as they were back then, the Topps Starfield cards. Strangely, the ones that I remember most, I'd actually picked up at a little charity shop. There's a charity chain called Dr. Bernardo's in the UK, and I remember picking up a big stack wrapped in a rubber band. Now, I was at primary school, so I was maybe 9 or 10 when I got those. But before that, I don't remember a lot. We did have a magazine called Look In when I was very young, and they would have Panini sticker books when a movie came out. So the one I remember most was Return of the Jedi. So it came in a baggie, of course, and then there was you got your sticker book with your little kids magazine, and there was like a pack of stickers. Then the following week you get 2 packs of stickers, and then that was it. That got you going, and that was always a fun thing. And back then, and I don't know how sticker collecting works anymore. I see a lot of the soccer player and team cards, but back then you used to be able to, when you got to needing only 20, you could send off and pay 2 pence for each of the stickers you still needed to complete your collection. So there's a little bit of a get out. It wasn't like we have to now, where we buy, we're down to the last 5 cards. It's like, oh, it's another blaster box, and you get 1, another blaster box, you get 2. So back then there was an inexpensive out for the collector, which there is not so much now. Although having said that, being in this community has helped an awful lot. There's a couple of sets that I've managed to complete, including my Book of Boba Fett blue parallel set, which is the only full parallel set I've got that Greg, you and Ross up at ICC the other year helped me complete. So the community's helping a lot with that. It's saving us a lot of cash, I think, when it comes to trying to round out these sets, because they do get bigger and the quality is better. So I do see why they're so expensive. But when it comes to those magazines you're mentioning, not so much. I did see you've recently started collecting the comics, those weeklies, and I do remember seeing them, but I don't believe I had them. I don't have a memory of having those.
You got some great covers on there, that sort of retro feel. Well, retro feel now to them. They pop. They're nice colors, aren't they? They got like a nice neon feel to them.
I've been really, I like the ads in there because I know that there's a upcoming Kickstarter from folks who are going to be doing another Palatoy. I think they're going to go into the Palatoy story. I think a fuller one that's probably been done before in a book, and I may hop on that Kickstarter because it's interesting that it's a mirror. Like I'm from Ohio, and that's where Kenner is in Cincinnati, but to kind of see how it is in the U.S. and that there was a lot more. There's a classic Death Star playset that we're kind of more familiar with, but apparently there's a whole lot more to it. But to see these mirrors of not only the cards that came out, but also the action figures and the comics and whatnot, something I'm kind of looking forward to later this year. Like I said, still planning to do LFCC in July. But as I started to go, before I get too crazy on some of these issues where I'm paying, I'm helping the Royal Mail service out. I'm like, what, this might be something where, and maybe, I don't know if we necessarily talked about this, but Daz, did you happen to notice if you saw some of the classic comics turn up at LFCC last year?
I wish I could say, but I don't recall spotting them. But that's not to say that they weren't there somewhere. They had a pretty good variety of stalls out there, but if only I pay more attention. I can't say for sure.
You're too busy on the FaceTime audio call with me. Is that what you were doing?
Oh well, there was that, and there was Mark Newbold as well, was keeping me chatting.
It's funny because I think this weekend there is a con. I know that artist Mark Tompkins and Jamie Richards at, I think, Festival of the Force, and I think this was the first time I found that there was a place called Newark, because I was born in Newark, Ohio. So I was like, oh, I guess that's where it comes from. There you go. But I think it's kind of getting me in seeing more of these as I've been, you read more on Fantha Tracks or Making Tracks or whatnot, and you're kind of following that. It does seem that the convention scene in the UK quite alive and well. Daz, are you going to have any money left after Celebration to do anything other, or is it just going to be like, I'm just going to be hunkering down here on the on the Welsh coast and calling it a 2025?
At the moment, I'm definitely going to make the London Film and Comic Con. It was only the first time I'd been last year, and I liked it. It wasn't too crazy. It was nice. It was a nice size. It didn't feel too crazy. It wasn't too busy. Not to say that it was empty. It was far from it, but it was one of the more relaxing cons I'd been to. I've been to much smaller cons which felt more busy because of the size of the venue, whereas I think it's at the Olympia that we were at, and it's a good space, and they don't overcrowd it. I really liked it, and I liked the kind of guests they were getting, and I liked the amount of access you could get to them. The one that stood out to me was I spent quite a long time speaking with Rissa Kalar, who was the stunt double for the young Ahsoka in the Ahsoka series. I've seen recently she's been working on like the Cobra Kai, all the karate over there, and it was not somebody who I was overly aware of before the con, but it was great hearing her stories because she was talking about being on set with Hayden Christensen, the fact that it was unusual for when they're working on the stunts for them to get the full makeup, but Ahsoka opted for it, I think probably due to the amount of movement that was going on. And she said that she was the Ahsoka, shall we say, that was there when Anakin got the Sith eyes, and she said that that moment really stayed with her. And it's those kind of people who I'm really interested to meet at perhaps going back to the London Film and Comic Con, looking at the guests that they've currently got slated for it. The one that stands out is I think his name's Ravi, so that's Wim from Skeleton Crew. He's probably about 21 with a beard by now, but I'm sure he'll have some stories. it'd be interesting to see. You don't know if you're gonna, it could, especially with a young actor like that. You don't know what he's going to go on to next. Perhaps he'll move away from acting. Perhaps there won't be many more opportunities to sort of get some of these stories, have the interactions, and again, let him know that like the work he did was appreciated and that you really enjoyed it. I think they're just like anybody. I think they like to hear that you've enjoyed what they've done. So I'll hopefully try and see him and see who else is there as well.
There are some nice names there. I think I'm looking. Whether I see Julian Glover is going back there, but I think the one that I'm smiling going, you know what, I think I could shell out 25 pounds for was this Stephen Bailey, who apparently is TK421, who is the one that's sitting there doing this, and I'm like, oh yeah, I could spend 5 minutes with this guy easy going. Just because these are some of the actors that, obviously with it being filmed in London, that you're going to get some of these extras and ones you wouldn't even think about, and you're going, oh, that's fun. In addition to, I would be surprised, as much as we are Doctor Who fans, Frank, how cheap some of the Doctor Who actor autos are at LFCC. When I'm thinking of like Colin Baker and Sylvester McCoy and Katie Manning and all those going, if you come to Chicago TARDIS, that is not a cheap event, great event, no slight, but it's like these autos cannot be. I'm like, it's almost worth it to go just to see some of these folks, and I'm sitting there going, all right, how many autos? It's not something I generally do, but I'm like what you're saying, Daz, is that, and even when we went to Huntsville, it's like, to have that kind of access, it's worth it.
Yeah, it is. And to Daz's point as well, where he was saying there about young actors who are just really on the radar now, you never know how popular they're going to become and how inaccessible they'll become. On the flip side of that, like you were saying about TK421, these actors are no spring chickens. We lost Angus McGuinness just recently, a gold leader. So these people aren't always going to be around for whatever reason, whether that is just demand on their time in their profession, or whether we're just this far after the origin of Star Wars and they're passing away as time goes past. So yeah, I like the idea of grabbing the opportunity when it comes. And again, we talked about celebration a moment ago. There's that celebration premium on autographs as well. You do discover that as well. The prices do vary. Sometimes when I've been looking at getting an autograph in an upcoming con, I try and get an idea by just like Googling, before the prices go out, so you can see where the money you do have has the most value. And you do get that premium as well. So to be able to meet someone who has, like you say, more time at a smaller con, who isn't necessarily being managed by some kind of a publicity company. There was a gentleman, when I got Omid Abtai's photograph last year at Huntsville Comic Con, there was a couple beside us, and he came over and started talking to him. And when he left, Amy and me said, "You know him?" He said, "Oh no. It was just there was nobody at his booth." We walked over. We had a lovely conversation with him. We walked past him again a little while later. Same situation. Continued the conversation. So you get the access that you don't always get in the larger cons. So some of those local ones, as well as supporting that local con, you get some good deals and some good exposure to some of the stars that you might really like.
Frank, we were kind of talking off mic. Huntsville is coming up in April. You were kind of excited about some of the guests there. Would you mind telling us about that?
Yeah, of course. So that's at the Von Braun Center here in Huntsville, April 25th, 26th, and 27th. Emily Swaltz is the big Star Wars name this year. Ernie Hudson's going to be there. Everyone knows as Winston from Ghostbusters, but of course he was the voice of the Doherty in the faster episode of Bad Batch. So there's a little Star Wars connection there as well. There's some real off-the-wall names this year as well. We've got Weird Al Yankovic there. We're still waiting to see who's going to be coming up in the way of Star Wars. There's been a lot of Star Trek announcements. William Shatner's going to be there. That'll be his second year. Walter Koenig's going to be there again this year as well. So there's some big names coming up. The panels are usually pretty good. I mean, it's a fair-sized room that the panels happen in, and they're usually a good 40 to 60 minutes long, So, and again, like I said, with Omid and some of the other performers that are going to be there, and they're still announcing now, the chance to get to them and not just be hurried along with a scribble on a photograph. It's really a delight. It really is nice to be able to speak to somebody, especially if it's a character that you particularly appreciate, or or the character's traits resonate with you, or whether you just admire that actor for whatever their catalog is in voice work or screen work. So yeah, the Huntsville's coming up. We've got our tickets. Greg, it sounded like you might be considering coming along, which would be fun.
I enjoyed it. I think the 2 years ago I got to go. I wasn't down there long, but you had that story about Dr. Pershing, Oman. And I think I walked past his table, right? It was getting near the end of the day. And just because the proximity of where those autograph tables were, the aisles were quite small. And they weren't like way off like back in C2. And I kind of walked past. At one point, I was trying to do like a walk around. And sometimes they work out well. Sometimes you're like, just put the camera down, Greg. But, our eyes kind of locked for a second. And he wasn't doing it. Nobody was around him. And I just like, hey, I just wanted to come up and say, I just loved you in this role. You were awesome. And we just had like a minute. And that's all. I'm like, that's all I really want. I'm like, I would go back and if see him again, I definitely would go back and have like pay for pay for an autograph or something, just as sort of a thank you for just like, because Celebration, getting a thing, it doesn't mean don't get an autograph at Celebration. I mean, because there's going to be some access or some guests that you're just not going to get unless you go. And there is a thing. There's an excitement of I saw them at, and it's like when I saw Kevin Thompson and his wife, lovely wife, at Celebration. They were outside visiting folks. Kevin Thompson was an Ewok in Return of the Jedi, but they were outside visiting, just hanging around with fans and taking pictures and so forth. And we got the chance to take a picture and talk for a little bit. And then I'm like, they were inside because she had written a book on Kevin, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do this because it was fun, and it's to have that and go, all right. It's also it's easy to take home too, right? Because it's like, all right, I can fit an 8x10 somewhere and all this, as opposed to like bringing home, me having to sit with a box. When I got the box, the empty box for Return of the Jedi for the cards, that was already folded, and I had to go to the quiet room and very carefully fold that thing back up because otherwise it was not making it home. But there's something to that, to go get an autograph at a Celebration, like a Hayden or a Ewan, which I think Amy got Ewan's autograph, and so did Greg Cass. That's something you're not going to get unless you're at one of those things. But at a smaller con, it's kind of fun because there's something in there for everyone. And even though I think autograph prices, we would all say, are kind of going up a little bit, I think budgeting accordingly, you could really have a gas. And that's why I think, this year, that might be something where it's like, yes, it's something I don't have to worry about packing home so much, but it's the experience of having it. And that's why we do this to begin with, right?
Greg, you mentioned packaging things up there as well, and this is something Des was talking about as well, with perhaps buying things to bring home. Now, a helmet, you can always fold that box flat and wear the helmet home. I don't think they're buying that on the airline. So,
well said.
that is,
I can see the news headlines now.
Yeah.
Do you need another pilot? I could do it.
Oh yeah, there you go. Co-pilots, just the entire cabin is co-pilots. But that aside, I'm not sure what it'll be like in Japan, what experiences you'll have there. When Celebration was at Chicago, they had a place in McCormick Place that was a post office. We actually shipped a number of boxes home, just like, well, we don't want to be taking extra cases. It gets us off our hands right now. And it would be interesting to find out if that's something that people have already looked into. As you're saying that people are right now, they're doing all sorts of logistics, working out, planning this and that. And it makes you wonder what's the cheaper option? Is it packing an extra case full of stuff and paying for that to come back, or putting it in a box and shipping it? That's one of those things that could be a massive difference in what you can buy and what you can move around the planet from Japan.
I'm going to have to add this to my list for things I need to ask Ross about. Sorry, Ross.
Ross knows all.
I mean, don't overthink the fact, Daz, you might be able to fit in one of Ross's suitcases. So you might that'll take care of your ticket right there.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, we're all sorted.
Good Lord. Still like, wear the helmet was not something I really, that's one of those questions, when I was in quiz team, right? When they talk about if you were trying to, if you're trying to ship milk from England to the United States and you don't want to worry about refrigeration, how do you pull that off? So one of the few questions I got right when I was doing a major competition. You ship the cow. But it's one of those things where I never thought of, like, take out the helmet from the box and wear the helmet. And I'm like, in at least part of that journey, you're going to be with enough fans that no one's going to really notice or care. They're going to be like, no, okay, I see what you did there. As opposed to, like, say, if you bought a lightsaber, right? If you're bringing a lightsaber home from Galaxy's Edge, there's another one where I think you can get the tubes and things so you can get it home. Woe be it to the first, folks had to kind of figure that out on the airlines when they go, all right, now the people at Orlando are like, all right, we've got this down. Fine. These idiots are bringing a very long, golf club home. But
yeah, that's the nice thing about Celebration as well. Enough people know what's going on that whatever you do is not considered weird in any way. Do what you want. It's fine.
Let me just add a little addendum to that. Your definition of weird may not be what the Rebel Base Card thinks is weird. Your mileage will vary. Professional drivers closed course. At any rate. Okay.
Hey, it's a safe space.
It's a safe space. All right. I know we're kind of going a little long, but I did want to kind of finish up. I think we will leave our Andor wish list, and boy, we have a big Andor wish list, to a breakfast pack, a hot stove, and Greg, this. Because you're not here does not mean that you have been fired, even though I know our lists on the Coffee with Kenobi show rankings were a little different. But that's the beauty of it right there. But we do want to do some hot stove. And, of course, we'll probably have you both back on at some point over Andor, not for the premiere because Daz will physically not be there. And I don't want to waste our FaceTime time talking about Andor when I could be quizzing him about what cards are on there and how much stuff I'm going to have him bring home from the Celebration store. Separate story. We'll table that for now. But I am kind of curious as we kind of wrap it up. This is Star Wars Podcast Day, and this is what, for me, is fun about doing a Star Wars Podcast Day episode, because there's a little bit of everything in here. But I do want to kind of finish out. We've mentioned a lot of our friends who are podcasters and podcasts we listen to, and maybe this time I'll start with you, Frank. What are some shows that we haven't maybe discussed tonight, or things that you would like to highlight as a podcast that maybe someone can pick up and go, oh, I haven't had that in my playlist yet. Let me cue that up.
Well, I just given the opportunity there, I'd like to bring up the Legal Geeks again. When we spoke a few weeks ago, I mentioned the Legal Geeks briefly. Josh Gilliland and his many guests and co-presenters, they take on Marvel shows, Star Wars shows. They've just finished their Skeleton Crew run, and they look at the legality of some of the story points, which, although sounds heavy, does get into the legal ins and outs, but it's always very, very jovial, and they have a good time. It's a good listen. So Legal Geeks, I again would really recommend giving it a try. And Legal Geeks on Instagram is a really good follow as well. Josh does a lot of these short videos where he'll talk through points from all manner of things, whether it be Marvel or Star Wars or Star Trek. I mentioned before Universal Monsters or the kaiju stuff. So it's just a joy to listen to them and to see him on his Instagram reels. So that's one I'd not hesitate to recommend to anyone.
Oh, excellent! I love that. Daz, you look deep in thought. I know you've got a podcast playlist, and that we're occasionally on, especially when we have you on. Very easy to recommend the Rebel Base Card podcast when we have Daz on. But Daz, what are some of the other ones maybe you've discovered in the meantime, or maybe you have kind of switched categories and go, you know what, I haven't had a chance to do this yet. What do you got?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of one that maybe isn't on, a lot of our radars. And one that I came up with was it's a podcast called One Hell of a Fanfic. Now, fanfic is not something that like I've really dabbled with myself. I think that there can be a bit of a stigma about it, and people are unsure on sort of the sort of validity of it as like a fun pursuit. But there's a couple of podcasters, Lauren and Steph, and they only put out one episode a month. It comes out on the first of every month, and what they do is I think they alternate. That one of them will choose a fanfic that they found online. They'll both read it over the month, and then they'll come back. probably no longer than an hour, somewhere between half an hour and an hour. And what I like about it is you don't have to read the fanfic yourself; that they will sort of carry you through this story. And a lot of them are things like sort of alternative, like what if stories. Some of them throw characters who you might not necessarily have seen together, but perhaps always wondered what that would be like. And I think it's just it's a good way of dipping your toe into that sort of side of Star Wars fandom.
That's also I met Stephanie Hatton a couple years ago at Joliet Star Wars Day when I was there, because Jonesy from she was with Jonesy from the Cantina Cast, and so it's fun when you can kind of see all these different intersections of. And what's also great is that when we talk about when Ross was doing Album Cockpit podcast, or you have like the Colby Cast or Long Take Review, where you have a lot of our friends, and they may not be doing that. They'll do some Star Wars related content, but maybe they do other ones. Thinking like my friend George over at Meanwhile the podcast. The Wax Pack Hero, Mike Summers, and all that, where Ian Taylor, Marvel Card Collectors Podcast, where these folks you get to know over time, you get to meet them on occasion, but it's really great because it's almost easier. That's one of the things I think you strive for. If someone can kind of keep listening to the show, you can get them once. It's trying to keep them coming back. That's the real trick. But it is kind of fun because then later on, people kind of get to know, and they're not afraid. Maybe if you're branching out in a topic. Like, with Star Wars Podcast Day, I don't know if there's any particular product subject that you really have to do. Because also there's 100 other folks out there, and they're all trying to do their versions of it. But, when you think about, we talked before about doing the show recaps, or you're doing you're talking to different folks, you're trying to do your own show. It's kind of fun when you get to kind of know these podcasters. So even if you're picking up meeting Bob from Short for a Stormtrooper, right? And his 15-minute shows, where I'm sitting there going, how is he only doing 15 minutes? We've been going 15 minutes times a lot more than 15 minutes. But it's great because podcasts don't have to be any particular length. I've listened to shows that go 2 to 3 hours. Listen to any Cantina Cast or RFR at random, and they're going 2.5. The after shows for RFR were going 2.5 hours. I'm going, how? But the show itself was 30 minutes. But there's just so much to talk about. And so I think as you're going through, and if you're going in your podcast player and you're looking for Star Wars Day, or you're looking online, I think Star Wars Day also has a Facebook page that you can see all the participating ones and kind of see. I'm kind of curious what other people are doing for this, but there's a lot of shows out there. And every time I think I've seen there's the list, you'll find another vein. And here's another. You dig down a little deeper, and you'll find another vein, and there's a whole list of shows with a bunch of other great creators. You go, I haven't even listened to these folks yet. And because we're in between, shows like Skeleton Crew and Andor, and who knows what's going to happen after Andor. It might be a while before we see Vision Season 3 or another Tales of. This is a good time to discover other shows and to kind of see if you can find a creator out there. I know Greg and I will do our Greg's List during the breakfast packs, where we like to highlight folks. I'm reaching out and trying to get my Substack going again, and reach out to a couple of artists that might lend themselves better to a written interview, which is kind of fun, because that way it doesn't, just because audio isn't the thing that is going to work for them, that doesn't mean we can't hear what their voice is and what they have to say, and you can find and follow that person. Well, the thing I like about Instagram, you don't have to listen to Instagram. You can just flip through and see something you like. But anyway, I'm going on. But I did want to say I wanted to thank both of you for being on and helping me kind of wrap up Star Wars Podcast Day 2025. Lastly, I know that, Daz, you are going to Celebration Japan, and we'll probably have you back around. Like I said, we'll see if this shelf continues on, and the quest is like, how many helmets? How many helmets is too many helmets is, I think, a question that Daz is going to have to answer at some point in 2025 and beyond. What is the helmet that is too many helmets? But in the meantime, Daz, while everything's still happy and you're figuring out Japan, where can people find you?
Oh, cheers, Greg. So if you want to find me on any of the socials, pretty much I'm at Davies1. Give me a shout. Always happy to say hello. And just going quickly back to the we were talking about podcasts, seems it being podcast day. Most podcasts I listen to, the hosts will say usually towards the end, if you have any questions, any comments, get in touch. I think that is something that I've done for years now, and honestly, it's engaging with the podcast. The podcasters themselves are really happy to hear that, and it's led to loads of fantastic friendships for me. So if you're listening now and you've always wondered about getting in touch and perhaps engaging with your favorite podcasters, my advice would be go for it, get in touch. These guys are great, and only good things can come from having a chat with them.
Well said, well said. Frank, while you are, I know you're going to keep those ghost figures on card, but I keep thinking one of these days you're going to crack and you're going to go, you know what? Ezra's coming out. Maybe you can say before you sign off, let me pose it to you. We're going to do a little different list. You finally had it. You woke up in the middle of the night. You go, one of these things is coming out. Which would the one that would make you crack the most and go, all right, this one's coming off card?
Ooh, oh wow, that's a good question. The one
so you stay to the end of the podcast, you get the good stuff.
Oh gosh, I think the one that I would enjoy off the card most would be Zeb. It's got to be Zeb. The rest of the guys stay where they are, but yeah, I could live with Zeb being here by the monitor or something. That'd be great.
And Frank, where can people find you online and or other places if they want to kind of connect?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, and occasionally Hive at Mr. Daft Prawn. Just want to say thanks, Greg. It's been good to get some screen time with you and Daz again. Don't do this nearly often enough, so this has been a real joy. Thank you so much, gents.
I appreciate it. And like I said, Podcast Day is about the community of podcasts, and you two are just some of my favorite folks in the community as well. We have a lot of great friends out there, and I almost thought about like throwing a bunch of other invites up. I'm like, all right, this would have gone from a lunch hour to the day, but everyone's kind of doing their own podcast or their own thing, or they're just listening and enjoying, or they're just collecting. Go out there, get involved in the community, whether you like a comment. I love Aaron Harris on Reactions, him and David Motters. When they talk about the end of their podcast, they talk about, like, just be kind, be nice. That's the thing. It's like these content creators, like these artists and folks who create and collect and all that, when they put their stuff off on the socials, it takes very little effort to add a comment, and I tell you, it just feels so great. Rather than just doing the doom scrolling, do some good in the community out there, and it'll come back to help you out to unfold.
I'd like to check out, refuel my ship, prepare for my immediate departure.
This was a fun episode. Happy Star Wars Podcast Day to everyone. I hope you go listen to a bunch of their podcasts, but until then, we're going to cut this one for this episode, and we'll be back more after this. I'm going to let Card Squadron, the rest of Card Squadron, take this out, and we'll talk to you soon.
The Rebel Base Card Podcast focuses on cards, collecting, and the Star Wars community, and appreciates you coming along for the ride.
If you have any feedback for this episode, you can reach out to the program in a number of ways. You can leave a comment on the Instagram post for this episode. You can also DM Greg on Instagram at Rebel Base Card.
Make sure to also follow the Rebel Base Card on Twitter and Facebook at Rebel Base Card. If you want, you can send an email to greg@rebelbasecard.com.
And you can find show notes for this and all episodes on the website rebelbasecard.com. In the Star Wars Card Trader app and just about every other one, you can find Greg at CornFedTech.
The Rebel Base Card uses the hashtag Card Squadron as a way to alert friends about cool cards and recent drops in the galaxy far, far away. It's a great way to bring our community a little bit closer together and help one another finish our sets in time. We collect, communicate, and commiserate. Well, at least when we run out of credits or crystals to spend on our digital collections. Join the fun, even if all the other cool squadron names were already taken. And remember, we collect as one, and would be honored if you join us.
And if you are a sketch card artist, or Star Wars artist or collector, cosplayer, and want to talk about your work, your craft or passion, drop Greg a line. I'm sure he'd love to hear your story. You can also help the show by leaving a comment or review on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you got this episode.
Otherwise, the mission is clear. Keep those cards out of the hands of the Empire, and the Rebel Base card will return soon.
This podcast is not affiliated in any way with Topps, Disney, or Star Wars, nor is it endorsed by Disney or Lucasfilm, and is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. All names and sounds and any other related items are properties of their respective trademarks and or copyright holders here in the U.S. and abroad. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com.
That's it.